me talk a little bit about crown lengthening. I'm not necessarily an expert on this and how to describe it. I just know when I see it. So let me tell you when I have seen crown lengthening. But first, I guess let me tell you what the grass crown is. So imagine the top of your head. You know, what's the old nursery rhyme? Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Well, what does that mean? It means that Jack fell on his freaking head. That's what it means. Jack broke his crown. He fell on his head. Your crown is the crown of your head. And I think of the crown as basically your hairline. Now, some of y'all got some interesting shaped crowns because your hairlines have receded. I don't think your crown is receded, but there's probably an analogy there with your grass receding, your grass getting thin, your hair getting thin. I don't know. Stress. Who knows, right? But either way, think of your hair when it was normal. Think of the edge of your hair. That's your crown, is all of that where your hair grows out of. Well, that's the same thing with a grass plant, essentially. The crown is where the grass blades are pushed up out of. And by the way, the crown is really the heart of the plant, as far as I'm concerned. It's the living part of the plant. It's the part that overwinters alive. If you allow your lawn to go summer dormant, it is the crown that has to at least get a half inch of water every 3 to 4 weeks to stay alive, because it will retain enough energy and moisture and whatever else it needs so that when that period of stress, in this case summer dormancy in the summer, relieves itself, it's got that stored energy to push up more grass blades and to push out down more roots and then eventually more rhizomes. So that's the crown. So it literally, maybe it's the brain if I'm using this analogy of the head, but you get what I'm saying. It's a very important part. Now, what will happen though, when you cut your lawn tall, is the same exact thing that we talked about with the stems of those seed stalks, is when you cut your lawn tall, there's a higher, longer blade waving at the top and getting hit with wind and all kinds of things. So the lower parts have to strengthen. They have to be more stout in order to hold those grass blades, Kentucky bluegrass blades or tall fescue blades, to hold them up, to hold them standing up tall. The base there has to be thicker. So the crowns will get thicker. Well, I don't know. John Perry will correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but you guys are getting it. Right at the base where the grass blade and the crown kind of meet together, that will get more stout and that will get more thick. It will also get taller because the pole will have to be taller to hold that longer flag at the top, especially because you're cutting it long. So that's what can happen. So now, when you come in and you cut too low, instead of cutting only grass blades, what you're cutting is those poles. And those poles are not grass blades. They're poles, and they are lighter green in the same case of that seed stalk, and they don't look good. Now, here's where I've seen this be a problem. And this, I don't think this is you, Joe, but I'm going to use this as an extreme in order to illustrate a point, a visual. I've seen this in lawns. I used to see it a lot, where the lawn was foreclosed. You have to realize when I worked for TruGreen, I worked through that 2008, 2009 crash. And so I saw a lot of foreclosed homes, lots of them. And in fact, we worked with lots of landscapers that had contracts where all they did was mow foreclosed homes and all kinds of things. So that's why I had some experience with this. And I would see some foreclosed homes that only got the lawn mowed once a month. Those lawns, when they were mowed, you would go out and it would look like only a few spindles of really coarse, thick, yellow stalks. You could literally see them, and they would only be 3 inches tall or 2 inches tall, because that's what it was. Almost like they were bush hogged, these lawns. That is lengthened crowns, because these lawns were neglected so much. The grass had grown so much, the crowns had thickened up to try to hold that grass up, but it was too much. And then when they came in, they cut everything off, and all that was left was crowns. That's an extreme. I don't think you're there, Joe. I don't think you're even close to that, my friend. What I think you have, and even if you said, hey, I broke the 1/3 rule a few times in the spring, I don't think that's enough to do it either. This has got to be, if you're mowing your lawn or letting your lawn get overgrown for a successive several months, and even if it's only overgrown a week or two, I don't know. I just don't think that that's the problem, okay? I think you guys are picking up what I'm putting down for the most part. What I think is actually the problem is that you've got areas where you don't realize it, but when you mow, there's a dip or a divot, and it's causing your lawnmower to bottom out in those spots, and then it is cutting into the crowns. It's not that you neglected it 3 or 4 times over the spring, or maybe you couldn't get it there because of long times of rain, long stretches of rain where you couldn't get to it, right? I don't think that would cause that issue. I just don't. Because you're somebody that is maintaining it, you are. You just don't think you're maintaining it as perfect as you think I tell you to, right? What I think is the lawnmower's bottoming out. So I would go look at that. Now, if you said the whole lawn was doing that, Joe, I'd say, well, maybe you are not mowing enough. But if it only seems to be in sections where it's lime green, I think probably that is exactly what's happening. The lawnmower is bottoming out in some way in those areas. But it's still fun to think about. It's still fun to kind of talk through and just kind of think about the strategy as you are. So I wanted to just compliment you there. Now, what I will say is for those of you that are taking over a foreclosed house like I talked about, or a neglected lawn where it's all these like thick tufted stalks like that, or if you have sections that are doing that, the cure is to mow. What will happen is eventually the crown will adapt. And that's the best thing about grass. It's adaptive. A grass is so adaptive. Look, go out right now and find grass growing on the side of the highway that is neglected and it looks beautiful, especially after a rainstorm when it gets free nitrogen. Go look at grass that will grow in the middle of the street. You know you see it. Grass is highly adaptive. After a forest fire, you know what the first thing is to regrow? The grass. Grass is extremely adaptive. It can grow just about anywhere. Now, it's not always going to grow in this perfect, beautiful lawn like we want. That's not the case. But it is adaptive, and that's what I want you to get out of it. It's a strong plant. It's an alpha plant. In general, it's alpha. So what you want to do is you want to teach it to adapt to your ways. Hey, grass plant, I know right now you got these super strong poles that you're pushing up because everything's been long and somebody's been neglecting you. So because they've been neglecting you, you grew these strong poles to hold up these big, nasty tufts of grass that no one's cutting that are laying over and everything looks bad. But I just bought this house. It's been in foreclosure or it's been ignored for all these years. Now I'm going to have to come in and cause you some pain, and I'm going to start cutting at 4 inches, and ouch, that hurts, and all I have are these tufted green stalks. But listen, I'm going to keep cutting at 4 inches every 3 or 4 days. And what you're going to do, grass, what you're going to do, turf, is you're going to figure out what I'm doing to you, and it's going to recede those stalks down. That crown will adapt and say, okay, is this how we're going to play it now, bruh? Fine, I'm going to send up some more grass blades, and you tell me how you want to play it. That's what your crown's going to say to you. I'm going to send up some new grass blades, and you're the leader now. You're the man now. Nobody lived in this house anymore, so I had to take over. I had to take over this lawn and grow these big, fat, nasty, tufted stalks. But you're here, Mr. Homeowner, now. Welcome to the party, pal. You tell me how it's going to go. I'll follow your lead from now. And what you do is you just mow. You just establish the cultural practice to mow at 3.5 or 4 inches or whatever your chosen height is, and you do that every single 3 or 4 days. And in several weeks, it will adapt, and it will come back, and your lawn will be looking good. And by the way, for those of you with Bermuda grass, same thing. You guys ever seen leggy Bermuda? See, Bermuda grass should be cut low. Bermuda grass really should be cut with a real mower. That is the optimal way to cut Bermuda grass, but it is not something that is practical for 99% of us because it is a high-maintenance grass when you do it that way. You can make Bermuda lower maintenance by cutting it a little bit higher, and the way you do that, I would say you cut it at around 1 to 1.5 inches. Now, it could definitely stand to be even lower than that, but most of your rotary mowers are not going to do well below 1 inch, as well as most of your lawns are not flat enough. We'll talk about a flat lawn a little bit later here, but most of your lawns are not flat enough to mow below 1 inch anyway. You will bottom out, as we were talking about here with Joe. So with that, though, if you have Bermuda that gets leggy, the reason it gets leggy is because you let it grow really long, and so what it does is it throws all of its little leaf blades up in the top, and below it, those are thick brown stalks that don't have any leaves on them that are there to support that top growth. And then you come in, let's say you've been mowing your Bermuda at 3 or 4 inches, which a lot of people do, and all of a sudden you decide you're going to cut that Bermuda down to 1.5 inches because you heard me. You're like, oh, I'm going to take this down low. What do you get? You get nothing but a bunch of brown stalks showing up everywhere. Now that's Bermuda, and that's called leggy. If you want to Google search leggy Bermuda, or if you just want to remind me, I will show you. I got tons of leggy Bermuda in my lawn. I got so much Bermuda leg in my lawn, it's almost going to have to get a permit. That's how much Bermuda leg I got in my lawn. It gets ugly, but the idea being that's a similar way to look at it, or that's a similar thing you can see in a southern warm season grass type. All in all, the key is, whether it's you, Joe, with your cool season grass or somebody with leggy Bermuda, choose the height that you want to be at, go there and teach the grass, have the grass adapt to you. And I promise you it will, as long as you're following all the other practices we talk about, good watering, good fertilization, keeping things consistent, and mowing every 3 or 4 days.